let's just sew whatever. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be making the Sadie Expandable Tote from Swoon. This was part of the Bag of the Month collection, and then it was released to everybody a while ago, honestly. So I made mine with a chocolate brown vinyl and this fun pop of color yellow. And then when you open it, wabam, even more yellow. And then the lining is navy. I used antique gold hardware, and then we added crossbody strap instead of a regular strap. And then we used waterproof canvas to line it. The only fleece that I used in this pattern is in the flap, and all that I have is one layer of woven fuse, one layer of fusible fleece, and then vinyl. And we used Decoville light and heavy scraps to interface the snaps. So inside we added a zippered pocket and a slip pocket. And then the back has a fun magnetic pocket. So there's all kinds of pockets in this bag. One of my favorite parts is the accent pieces on the side. I think they're really, really fun. They're easy to do. I've made this bag so many times, and one of my favorite things to do is add an accent strip along the flap. But because of the size of what I wanted to fussy cut, I decided to forego adding that. But it really does class up the bag, and it kind of ties together the accents on the front as well. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think that's pretty much it. If you need hardware, be sure to check out my website, moremeknow.com. Links to things are down below. If you want to know what kind of thread that I use, needles, all that stuff, if you click the little arrow underneath the title, it'll bring down all of my affiliate links, coupon codes, all the information on my machine so that you don't have to keep asking the same questions over and over again. Thank you guys so much for watching, and enjoy. Okay, because I'm pretty sure I have most of my pieces here ready to go, we're gonna go ahead and start with our crossbody strap and get that guy out of the way, especially since I think I have a full bobbin. So I cut a 4-inch wide piece of vinyl, 54-inch long piece of vinyl as well. It's the same piece of vinyl, it's just two different measurements. My bad, y'all. Yeah, we're just gonna add one piece of 1/2-inch double-sided tape down the center. And then as I unpeel it, I'm gonna fold my edges in. We're not going to line it up all the way with that center line, just like 1/8 of an inch away is good. Just so that way when you fold it over, they're not like sitting directly on top of each other. There's a little bit of wiggle room. I believe this bag calls for a shoulder strap, not necessarily a crossbody strap, but the few times I've made this bag, my customers have requested crossbody, so that's just kind of what I'm going with. You could, however, add like a shoulder strap on swivel clasps, kind of like we did in the Lola video. If you haven't seen that, I would go check it out. And then you can kind of have options for your customer, and I don't think they'll complain. So then they could just remove whichever one they don't want to use or keep them both on there. Up to them. I'm starting So turning my machine on. At the bottom, my stitch length is set to 5. We'll just go down the other side. I'll use my thread zap. And grab my 1-inch slide adjuster. If you did not purchase your slide adjuster from a reputable website or you're not sure how wide it is, I definitely would recommend testing it before you make your strap. Some are not built to be wide enough. These luckily are. They're from my website. And just secure that very well. Could use my hot knife thread zap, but these are already in my hand, so whatever. Okay. Then you'll take your 1-inch snap hook, pointing down, slide it all the way through. Just kind of make sure everything is sitting correctly. Slide it through the top, and then slide it on through the bottom. So in one way, out the other. Kind of like when your husband asks you to do something, or vice versa. And pull it through. So it's tight, but it's still adjustable, but it's also going to not slide around on your customer. And then we'll flip that up, and you can either add a few rivets there, or you can sew it together. I like to cut that piece kind of at an angle, and then I'm going to make a box stitch. So on the right side, back stitch. I'll sew up a few stitches and down. And then I sometimes will just do one little diagonal, or you can do 2, it's up to you. And that is your crossbody strap completed. So I'm just gonna roll this up and set it aside for now until we're ready for it later. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and sew on our accent pieces. When you're cutting these out, you really want to be careful that you make markings for which way is up, so that way they fit nicely. So I just added little arrows. They kind of look like little bananas. At least they do right now anyway. So I've got them all clipped on. I have not added really interfacing to most of the pieces because I'm using this really thick marine vinyl. I figured with that and the waterproof canvas, there's going to be plenty of body. I've just added Decoville Heavy, where I'll be adding snaps. So, yep. So a stitch length of 4.5, and we're just going to trace around these accent pieces. The pattern does have instructions if you are using a woven fabric for these. You would just sew them together first and then turn it right side out and then sew it on. I've just kind of always done it in vinyl. Nice and slow around the curves. Back stitch. If you wanted to, you could also add piping to this stitch, kind of like we talked about in the Charlotte video. That would also look super cute. I'm pretty sure I've added piping to this bag on some pockets. You can add piping to just about anything. Okay. There is that completed. And then this goes with a lining piece that I need to add a snap to. So I'm just going to clip those together for now so that I don't forget. We'll add those snaps in a minute. And the snap is going on to the lining piece. However, I interfaced here because of wear and tear on your bag. Your snap is going to rub against that, so I figured may as well add some interfacing there too. Couldn't hurt. So now I'll top stitch this front piece. And that is the front accent pieces and technically the back accent pieces sewn on. I'm going to go ahead and grab 2 snaps. Oh, I don't think the back panel, does the back panel have a snap? The front does. Okay, yeah, my brain just went. We're going to go ahead and add our male and female snaps really quick. So this is the front of the bag as clearly indicated by my ballpoint penmanship. And we're going to add the female part of the snap to the front of the bag. Oh, Ben, what? And we'll add the male part to the front pocket. You don't want anything too much on that pocket. Yeah. So as usual, I'm probably doing things a little out of order than the pattern. But this is just kind of like a nice flow for me. And who knows, it might work for you too. Okay. And you could add a little bit of fusible fleece to this lining piece if you wanted to kind of stabilize that snap, but I think it'll be okay. And then while I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and sew this top piece. Half-inch seam allowance. I'm not going to use my iron to press it. I'm just going to kind of finger press this because I'm using vinyl and waterproof canvas. Neither of those are easily ironable. So you can top stitch this piece and then go ahead and baste it all together as well. This is a really interesting color combination, but I'm kind of into it. So this is like a chocolate brown, navy, and yellow. And I'm hoping it all kind of works out. So again, I'm still using that stitch length of 4.5, and I'm just going to top stitch along this pocket. If you wanted to, you could sew 2 lines just to kind of differentiate it. I'm not sure if I want to do that yet. I'm just basting all those pieces together. So there is our front pocket ready to go. And then we've got our, or this is our back pocket, I'm sorry, and this is our front panel. And then we'll go ahead and get started on the flap. So now we're going to work on the flap, and we're going to add our remaining snaps. So the male snap is going to go on the back of the front flap. I've added a few pieces of Decoville light, just little scraps I had laying around. You could also use Decoville heavy if you wanted to. But I always like to use up scraps for those pieces. So just go ahead and attach that. And then I'm going to add the remaining female snap tab on the back panel of the back. So this pocket we already made, this is going to be set on top of that. So just kind of make sure before you attach them that they're going to line up nicely. It looks like it will be pretty good. So I've added a piece of Decoville heavy to the back. And what's really nice about this pattern is she has everything numbered. So if you get a little confused when you're reading the instructions or watching along, you could just kind of refer to those pattern pieces to help you keep it straight. And I would say that if you use 1 piece of Decoville heavy, it's equivalent to like 2 pieces of Decoville light. So, you know, like I said, whatever scraps you have laying around, really, honestly, it works the same. So I'm going to keep these kind of snapped together for now. I'm not going to baste them together. I just want to kind of keep it straight in my head of where everything is. And then we'll go ahead and sew our flap together. This is my main fabric. I've interfaced it with Woven Fuse, and then I've added some fusible fleece and then cut it out of the seam allowance. And then for this underlining side, I'm just using vinyl. I like to have a nice structured flap, but I also like to give it a little bit of body with that fusible fleece. So go ahead and clip it along the top, just to keep my layers together while I sew. And then using a stitch length of 4, I'm gonna sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance around the outside edge. And one thing I've done to help keep my fusible fleece out of the seam allowance is I printed off 2 pattern pieces and then trimmed one down to the fleece size. And if you're not really good at keeping your seam allowance accurate, you can either get a guide for your machine, or you could mark out your 1/2 inch seam allowance with like a ruler and a marking pencil, and then just make sure you follow closely along that line. So now you can use pinking shears if you want, or just, you know, kind of trim this down pretty well. If you want to use a little bit of steam when you turn it, you can. Just be careful you don't melt anything that you shouldn't be melting. Not that you should really melt anything anyway. I've also kind of added an accent panel to the front by tracing a 2-inch border, and that looks super, super cute as well. So there's all kinds of ways to make this bag really unique and fun. So I'm just kind of rolling that seam in between my fingers and adding some clips. If you don't trim your seam allowance down, it's going to make your bag not look as nicely curved. So that's why you, again, really want to fold that or roll it between your fingers and push it out all the way. And then there's really never enough clips. So there's that. Clip along the top if you want. We will be sewing along the top just as a basting stitch. I'm going to set my stitch length to a 4.5. I'm going to follow the edge of my foot with the edge of my flap. So just back stitch when you start and go nice and slow along that curve. If you have an edge guide foot or something, that will come in handy, but we're just going to go slow. And then I'll go across the top. And you just want to make sure nothing shifts. Hey, how about that? Thank you, bobbin. I was hoping I wouldn't run out of thread when I was top stitching that flap. Whew, thank goodness. All right, new bobbin. Before I make any bag, I like to make sure that I have 3, maybe 4 bobbins on deck ready to go, because you never know when you're gonna need it. All right, I'll finish basting that stitch. All right. And now if you want to, you could sew across the outer flap again, especially if you've kind of done double stitching on other things, just to kind of give it a little pizzazz. I'm gonna fold this flap in half and make a little center snip. And then I'm going to find my back panel. We can unclip this now. And then fold your back panel to the center as well. And we're going to lay these exterior sides together. So you're going to see the lining flap facing up, the lining of your flap, I should say. And I'm just going to baste it. And basting it is not required, but it does help things from shifting when they shouldn't, so that your flap doesn't, you know, kind of look wonky. We're going to take piece 8, pattern piece 8, and line that up right sides together. Normally this would have fusible fleece on it as well outside of the seam allowances, but since I'm using all vinyl, I decided to forego the fleece for most of the bag. And then there is a little bit of a notch. Hopefully you can see where it kind of starts to turn out that way. That is your seam guide. It's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just gonna sew across. So hopefully you're watching this video before you make the bag. If you are fussy cutting the flap, make sure that you put what your center image will be kind of lower on the bag, because you're not going to see it. So then we're going to flip this up like that, and we're going to top stitch through the flap. So you can see how I've kind of fussy cut this main image lower on the flap because this is going to get folded over our bag. And again, you can add 2 rows of stitching here if you like, or just the one is cute too. And then we can go ahead and lay our flap on there. And they should line up pretty well. And this is where I'm going to go ahead and baste it on now. I was a little worried about this color combo, but the more I see it, the more I like it. So that is the back portion with the front flap ready to go. Normally I like to finish the lining first, but we're on a roll with the exterior, so we're just gonna go with it. So really quick, I am steaming my zippers. This pattern doesn't really call for a lining zipper pocket, but we're gonna go ahead and add one anyway, just because customers usually like it. So I'll go ahead and set my lining pieces aside. And we're going to work on the side gusset piece. So for that, we have our top side gusset pieces. I'm not sure what they're called. We have our strap connectors. I feel like these are supposed to be a little bit smaller, but I've cut mine to 6 inches by 2 inches, and I'm going to use these 1-inch triangle buckles to attach them. And I've got these 2 pieces, which are cut mirrored. You do not want to have 2 of the same. You want them to mirror each other, like so. There is one flat side and one curved side, and we're going to be focusing on the flat side. I have these little arrows here on my flat side so that I can keep them well straight. So we'll set those aside for now as well. And here I have, this is the inner gusset piece. This is going to be peeking through when you unzip that gusset. So I thought this bright yellow would be super duper fun. So we're just going to go with it. I have a zipper that is much longer than I need it to be, but honestly, you'll prefer that than, you know, any shorter zipper you're going to come across. So we're going to start at the very top piece here. I'm going to let my zipper kind of trail off, and I'm going to start by kind of centering it up. This is a handbag zipper, so it's much wider than I need it to be, which again, I'd prefer that than an all-purpose zipper, especially for something like this. So it's going to trail off the edge quite a bit. Again, not an issue. So we're just going to start kind of clipping it slowly, unzipping that zipper for now, and you just kind of want to work it around that curve and keep a consistent zipper overage, if you will. So just kind of working it around that curve. And then again, over here, it's going to trail off just a little bit. Totally okay. So we're going to start sewing this one side of your zipper about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the vinyl, or about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the zipper, because we have that overhang. So we're just going to follow that curve and try not to move your zipper too much, and otherwise that's how you'll create like this wonky zipper. So before I get to the next part, I'm going to zip it up. And then I'm just kind of keeping an eye out for the top of that gusset piece. And I'm going to turn it and sew across my zipper. That's just going to help keep it nice and together. And then we're going to unzip it. You don't have to go all the way, but you want to go pretty far up there. We're just going to sew down the other side. Again, kind of clipping along that curve. This is probably the 6th or 7th time I've made this bag. The first time I made it was, I think, actually like 3 years ago today. Maybe 2 years ago it could be. I don't know, it's been a long couple of years. Again, you really want to stay consistent to that curve and your seam allowance. You don't want your zipper to overlap here. You just kind of want to let them touch and then continue your basting. Okay. Voila. So this is what that gusset piece should look like. I don't recommend adding a whole lot of interfacing to this piece if you are using a cotton fabric. You want it to be able to fold into your bag pretty easily, like so. So when you zip it up, that's what it looks like. It's pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie. Especially right now, it looks like a big long banana. So we're gonna unzip it. And what's nice about the fact that we've stitched across that is it's not gonna go past where we need it. So if we wanted to, we could go ahead and trim this off. So let's just go ahead and do that right now. All right, and now we're gonna grab one of the side panel, the side gusset pieces, and we are going to line up our center mark of that with the center mark of this. So these are just my pattern transfer markings. And we're gonna start by clipping that. And then we're just gonna work this straight side along this curved side. So it can get a little strange, but you just wanna like pinch them together and clip it from the opposite side. So we sewed on the zipper side and now we're gonna sew on the vinyl side so that we can see where we've sewn on the zipper side. Hopefully that makes sense. So if I tried to sew from this side, I wouldn't be able to keep it straight because I can't see where I've already sewn. So you wanna sew from the gusset contrast, I guess you could say. And then again, just kind of pinch those curves together and clip in place. So it looks a little wonky, but that is okay. And then we're just gonna come in about 1/8 of an inch from our existing line of stitching and try to make sure that your zipper doesn't shift or anything. Especially along those curves. Okay. And now the fun part. We are going to press that open. Again, there's that weird curve, but we're gonna work through it. We're gonna press it open and top stitch on the outer part next to the zipper, about 1/8 of an inch. And I am just pulling that seam apart. I am sewing through my zipper and my contrast fabric. take it little bit by little bit. Okay. Oh, can I have that back? Thank you. Stop it. All right, so we're just gonna repeat that step. Again, you want the flat side up against the curved side. You want to mark your arrows to the flat side, just as a reminder. And we're going to clip from the other side. And you could add 2 rows of stitching to this piece if you wanted to, just to kind of give it some more pizzazz. Okay. Now that it's clipped, we're going to sew from the opposite side. And then if your zipper kind of gets in the way, you can zip it shut if you need to. But if you do that, just make sure you kind of press everything flat again when you're sewing it. Stop it. Stop it. You're so playful tonight. Okay, and then we're going to unzip it. And make sure your zipper doesn't pop off if you cut it shorter. That would be bad. Back stitch. And just pull that seam apart and make sure you're stitching over this seam. And I really am. I'm using my fingertips here to pull my zipper, and I'm using my hand here to yank on the gusset. All right. So that's pretty much your gusset done. And now we just need to add our top pieces. The bag says to sew this piece in the seam allowance, but I'm going to go ahead and make it a connector on the side of the bag. I just think I'm going to like the look of that more, especially since it's not a shoulder bag. It's going to be a crossbody bag. So this is a 6" by 2" piece. I went ahead and cut 2 of them. I'm just adding tape down the center. We're going to fold those edges in. And this is probably overkill. It's not necessary to make them this long. You'd probably be fine with a 4", but they're already cut, so why not? So I'm just gonna add a piece of tape around the center. I'm gonna grab my 1" triangle buckle. There we go. No, I don't think it'll be too long. All right, and then I grab one more piece of tape to keep it in place while I'm sewing. Oh yeah, there's plenty of space. So you can either do this after you've sewn it together or before, as far as adding this to the gusset, but I'm gonna put it 1.5 inches down from the center. So to find the center, I'm just literally folding it in half, 1.5 from the top. Oh yeah, that'll be perfect. Well, let's do 1" from the top. Yeah, that's much better. 1" from the top in the center, if you're doing it this way. Otherwise, you can just do it like the pattern suggests and put it within the seam allowance. but that can get pretty bulky, especially if you're using vinyl. So that's another reason you might want to do this. So 1 inch from the top, that was my final answer, in the center. Yeah. And then we're just going to do a box stitch. You could also just kind of rivet it on if your machine isn't very strong. Whatever works. And since I'm using this nice beige thread as contrast, I'm going pretty slow so that things look nice. All right, so now when you're doing a box stitch, if you're not able to kind of eyeball the diagonal, you can use your ruler to line it up too, or mark it out even. Just gonna kind of eyeball it. And then you can stitch across again. And here we go. And I'm going to use my thread zap to keep those threads from fraying. And voila. So it's just a way to make the bag a little more industrial or rustic looking, whatever. And then this gets laid across the top of your gusset panel. You can see mine got a little uneven. That's okay. I'm going to go from the shortest side and clip. And if you followed the interfacing instructions, you'll have fleece on this piece, and you're just going to sew right up against the fleece. That's your seam allowance. And I'm not going to trim any excess. I'm just going to fold it up and sew through that seam allowance. Again, you could add 2 lines of stitching here if you wanted, or just 1. Can you tell I've made this bag so many times, and I've made it like fancy and not fancy so many times. All right, so we're going to add this other connector. Make sure it's on there nice and straight. What is it getting caught on? Oh, my needle. It's like, what is happening? My needle was down a little too far. Hot knife. Okay. And then if you want to, you can trim your excess zipper. I'm going to wait and see. It may not be in the way and I can leave it just as extra security. Sometimes when you trim your zipper, you risk the possibility of fraying over time. I know it sounds crazy, but I've had it happen. Was it probably user error? Of course, but we'll just go ahead and blame the zipper. Okay. Yeah, I don't need to trim that. And then you could go ahead and zip it up just to see what it looks like. It's kind of fun, right? I think it's fun. I love this yellow sunflower brown combination. So now we're ready to put the exterior together and move along with this bag. All right, let's get this side gusset on. Are you ready, Ben? Are you with me? You can start with the front or you can start with the back, whatever you want. But I always like to keep in mind which way your bag is going to be facing and sitting on a body. So I'm gonna have my zipper on this side, so I'm gonna start with the front. And add a few clips to the top and line up the center. So you see there's a center mark on your gusset, a center mark on your bag. If not, you can go ahead and fold them in half, as we do. And then I'm not sure if having it zipped or unzipped is more helpful, but I'll go ahead and unzip it for now. Yeah, unzipped is much more helpful. There we go. And a little trick I've learned over the years to make this bag a little bit easier is I'm just going to add little tiny snips in the curve. Little tiny snips. You don't want to go too far in. Just really little. Not too big like that one I just made. Yikes. It'll be okay. But that just helps you squeeze it into that curve a little bit better. And you can add staples here if you need to. Pretty sure I already said that, but either way. Perfect. All right, so everything is nice and clipped together. So we're gonna sew around the outside. 1/2 inch seam allowance. And sometimes I like to backstitch over my accent panels just to help reinforce when I trim it all down. I don't want those stitches to come undone. And just kind of press this flat as you go so that there's no puckering. Okay, and then we can go ahead and trim the excess seam allowance down. Beautiful. So it's looking really fun so far. And now we can grab our back panel and line up those center marks. And this gets a little complicated because you have your flap here. So if your seam allowances really aren't correct, this is where it's going to show and it won't be good. Okay, so we're going to clip that together. What wouldn't be good is if you kind of sewed through your flap, so just keep an eye out for that. Okay, great. So now we can add, again, just those little snips. As you can see, you really don't even have to go too far with those little bite marks. All right, and then we're going to sew along that. And you're pretty much just going to be right next to your flap. You can kind of squeeze it out of the way a little bit if you need to. Keep in mind this section is going to be a lot thicker because you've got that back pocket, which you could omit if you really wanted to. But I don't think anybody's going to be mad that their bag has more pockets. So now our exterior is completed. We can go ahead and focus on the lining. The lining is going to get a slip pocket and a zippered pocket. You could add a magnet to the slip pocket if you wanted to, or you could, you know, omit, add. I feel like at this point, if you've seen any of my videos, you know that you can do pretty much anything to the inside of a bag. All right. And this bag really is a cute little size. It's not too big, it's not too small. It's really nice. So let's go ahead and get started with the lining. I went ahead and steamed my lining slip pocket just a little bit so that I am more easily able to fold it. I'm going to fold the top edge under about 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to fold it down one more time. This is just so there isn't a large raw edge on the top or anything. It seems a little more finished, especially since with the waterproof canvas, I'm only using one piece. I think putting 2 of these together in a pocket is just overkill, big time. On this pocket, you could add card slots, you could add another little pocket, you could add an ID slot, a little pen holder if you wanted to. Make it really cute and your own. We're just going to lay this there. You could line up your center snips if need be. Just going to clip it in place and baste along the outer edge. The gusset of your bag gets sewn together at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And this is the lining gusset. I'm not sure if you're supposed to open it up and sew, but I like to open it up and top stitch one side. I don't do a butterfly stitch because I think that could compromise the durability, especially with waterproof canvas. Water could seep through those holes. You never know. So I fold it all the way to one side and just sew it down. Fold our lining panel in half. Make a center snip. And you're going to line up the center seam, not the center stitch line. And we're just duplicating what we did on the exterior when we sew that gusset on. I'm just kind of clipping it in place so I don't lose it for the time being. I'm going to set it aside. And we'll add our zippered pocket to the lining. I like to add a 7-inch pocket, so we're going to fold one panel in half, fold our pocket in half, grab my zipper template from By Piera, take the 7-inch marking, as with most of the bags on this channel, we are going to birth through the zippered pocket, but we're also going to leave another hole open in the lining just because this is such a thick bag with all vinyl that it's going to be pretty tight getting it through the 7-inch hole. Okay. I can just picture myself one day cutting myself with these scissors because they are so darn sharp. But it would be worth it for how sharp they are, if that makes any sense. Alright, so turn that through and press with a lot of steam. So if you use my method and sometimes your little corners poke out, you can just poke them back in, pull them through. I'm gonna grab my zipper. You could choose not to add a zipper. You could just leave it a wide open slip pocket. Totally doable. By Piera also has templates for zipper pocket overlays, and I've added one to the inside of this bag, and it looks super cute. You could also decide to say, you know, you don't want to add the outer slip pocket. You could add an outer zipper pocket and add a vinyl overlay, and I think it would tie in really well with the overlays. I feel like this thread zap is really good for when your hands hurt or if you have arthritis. Instead of using these snips, this motion, you just press this button and run it along your threads and it cuts it off for you. All right. Trim my excess fabric. And then fold this up and press. All right, so now we'll get back to, hold on to that for me, sewing this all together. I'm gonna repeat that snipping process. They're so sharp. All right, Ben, I'm sorry, I'll move it. Oh, you are so warm and cozy. So this is the first time I will be birthing this bag using the method where you leave a large hole and your zipper pocket open. You birth it through the large hole and then you sew it up through your birthing pocket and then sew up your birthing pocket. It sounds like a lot, but it's less involved than it sounds. It's a lot easier on your hands. So we're going to sew one side completely. I'm going to start with a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top, and we're going to grade it slightly larger as we get to the bottom. We'll trim the excess. Okay, so now I'm going to clip the top together. And we're going to leave this bottom piece unsewn. So 1/2 inch seam allowance. Only along the top couple inches. Hopefully this works. And then we're going to turn this right side out. And put it inside the bag. So we're going to tuck our flap inside. And the flap right now is pressed against the back of the bag, and I always like to put my zippered pocket at the back of the bag. I don't know why, it's just a thing I do. We're gonna line up the side gusset pieces, clip those together. I'm clipping from the lining side because I think it's gonna be a little bit easier to sew with inside the bag than on the outside for now. I think in the sewing pattern, you're supposed to leave like the top unsewn and then turn it through and top stitch or something. Let's not even bother with that. Okay, the other gusset. If your gusset pieces don't line up, if your lining is a little bunchy, you're gonna wanna revisit some seam allowances and re-sew. These seem pretty good. So we're just going to sew from the inside of the bag in a nice loop. 1/2 inch seam allowance. Stitch length 4.5. You could go down to a 4, but since I'm using all vinyl, I just want to make sure that I don't perforate it. Just kind of slowly rotate, make sure things don't shift, and keep track of that seam allowance. Whoops. I moved and I didn't have my needle in the fabric. a clip. What did I hit? Oh, I hit my triangle connector. Watch out for that hardware. Okay. The hardware is good, so that's nice. My sewing machine is fine. Just make sure you collect all that needle piece. Oof, she is shattered. My eyes are okay. Okay, all right, we're gonna change that needle. I will be right back. All right, trauma blankets were used, needles were changed, it's all good. My triangle connectors are now completely out of the way. Whew. Good thing I got good hardware. All right, so we're gonna start a few inches back. Carry on. There we go. And then I'm just gonna double check that nothing really shifted. So I can see right here, things kind of moved. I'm not really happy with the way that looks. So you could either take your stitching out, or I'm just going to re-stitch it a little bit lower. I'm gonna start there, back stitch. There we go. And yes, my lining moved a little bit, so it's not gonna fit as tight in that corner, but that's not an issue because it just kind of helps prevent that saggy lining issue. So no biggie. All right, now we're gonna birth this bad boy. I also need to add a nameplate, so I'm gonna do that really quick while I've got my front all marked out. I'm gonna go 2 inches from the bottom. We'll go ahead and add a big nameplate to this one. Alright, so the holes are marked. Now I can birth it. So yeah, this is going to be super easy with this nice big open hole. Instead of pulling it out, I feel like I'm basically just pushing, which is really nice. Usually I feel like I have to pull the bag out and it's so painful. Especially with such thick materials. So I can see where I hit this connector with my needle, but the connector looks like it wasn't even bothered. All right. So I'm gonna get that nameplate attached. Make sure it's facing up. Oh yeah, great. Okay, push that corner out. And now for the fun part, as if you weren't already having fun. So I'm taking my hand through the zippered pocket. I'm gonna pull the zippered pocket lining out. And then I'm gonna grab my lining panels and pull those through the lining pocket. So again, there's a little bit of wrestling, but not nearly as much as it would have been to get the bag out of that 7-inch pocket. Okay. And it would have been smart had I marked out my center prior to doing this, but I think I can still kind of see it, so I'm not worried about it too much. just a note, if you're watching this before you make the bag, always just mark out your centers. All right, add a few clips along the straight bottom. And then we're gonna sew those curves. Oh yeah, not a problem. Not a problem. Just kind of pinch them together. Add your clips. Actually, I feel like it's almost easier in this small section. All right, so we're gonna sew that up. And then instead of cutting the entire seam allowance, I'm just going to trim in that curved area, because it can get pretty bulky down there. So now we can stick that back through. And again, it's more pushing than pulling, so it's a little bit easier on the hands. All right. So I'm just pushing everything back in the bag, and then I'm gonna sew up that pocket. I just wanna make sure everything looks nice. Go ahead and clip this. As you can see, I'm rolling that seam in between my fingers to separate the layers. Make sure it all sits nice. I would use an iron, but since I used vinyl, it's just not a possibility for me. I really was second guessing my color combinations for this bag, and I don't regret it at all. It's so much fun. I feel like I've definitely limited my buyers with this color choice, but I feel like the one person who sees it and loves it is just going to be like, I have to have it. Like, thank you very much. My price point on this bag, I believe, depending on materials, anywhere from $90 to $135. And if I'm using leather, it might be even a little bit more. So go ahead and seal it up. The curves of this bag can look a little bit funny but once you start putting stuff inside the bag, they kind of fit. See, once there's something inside to give it a little bit of shape, looks a little better. So yeah, we're pretty much ready to top stitch it now. I can't remember if you're supposed to keep the flap up. I feel like I have before, but I kind of want to keep the flap down and just top stitch around the outer edge and not go through the flap. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start at the back and work my way around. And I'm gonna make sure that my triangle rings stay out of the way this time. 4.5 stitch length. Triangle buckle is down. Stitch. Use that hot knife, and she is done. All right, so you can give it one final press, push everything out of the way. What is going on with my finger? Go ahead and grab your crossbody strap. This is another reason I like to just make the crossbody strap first, because once you're done, you're done. I feel like when you start a bag, it's all exciting and new, so it's like, ooh, I better get through the crossbody strap first. Oh my gosh, super cute. So that is the Swoon Sadie Expandable Tote, all finished. It is so stinking cute. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe before you go, and check out my horrendous manicure. Anyway, awesome. Good